I started to hate the gym experience.
Yeah.
I started to, procrastinate around, I'll do it next week. I don't feel so great about exercise anymore.
Yeah.
I've achieved everything that I wanted to. I'm healthier now. Everything's great. I can slow down. So that was a turning point. Why am I no longer enjoying this?
Became a barrier.
Yeah, it certainly was a barrier, and it took me 6 or 7 years, but I know for most people, it's probably, in a New Year's resolution, it's probably a few weeks.
Yes.
Right. If you last 6 or 7 weeks, you're doing great with lifestyle change, in my opinion. So 6 or 7 years in, I hit a brick wall. And I remember taking probably about three or 4 weeks out of the gym and not feeling great about it. Yeah. And so that was the light bulb moment in relation to me asking, when was the last time I loved exercise? Never.
Yeah.
Truthful answer was never.
Yeah.
Okay. Why have I never loved exercise? What's my history with exercise? PE at school, probably only enjoying the end of term when you could do whatever you wanted. That was probably the only time I would enjoy my childhood experience of exercise in the school environment. The second enjoyment would be if I was really good at something. So I wasn't too bad at basketball, not good enough good enough for the school team, but still not that great. But then it was an enjoyable experience. But I didn't enjoy a lot of the training drills. I just wanted to play. I just wanted to play the game. I just wanted to, be in games. I didn't enjoy the training so much. So that was an answer in relation to school experiences of exercise.
Yes.
Then thinking about doing things like martial arts. I did a bit of martial arts, and again, it wasn't that pleasurable. So I didn't enjoy that particularly. So it was like, well, when did I enjoy movement? Playing with my friends, long summer days. Couldn't wait to finish my homework so I could get outside. Playing games that involved a lot of risk, lots of adventure, lots of risk assessment and conflict and social dynamics. All of that was what I felt was important around movement.
Darryl, that is just fantastic what you're saying. I can see Graham is smiling as well.
Yeah.
The biggest chuckle that I had in that really was when Darryl said he would go out to play after his homework, because as soon as he said that, my connection was directly to the fact that I didn't bother with the homework. I just went out and played.
Yeah, I was a studious kid, Graham. Well, actually, no, it's probably more my parents were like, you have no choice. Yeah.
You can see the smile on my face, because this is what happens with words. Words connect to emotions. You can hear the tone in my voice now change in relation to the fact that I'm being very serious now. Even though I'm smiling, it is the strength of those connections. And those connections are story. Whether it's in your own head, as I've just verbalized a story, those are the sorts of connections that you have to make to be able to get someone who has no will or want to change anything. I mean, Darryl, you commented on the fact you knew you needed to change some things. But my interest is those people who have no interest. So, Manchester's Youth Gang scene, did they have an interest in any kind of change? Not a jot. Did they change? Massively. Because it's about allowing them to connect to some of the things that I did growing up, immersed in nature.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's it's fascinating, and I think it's I think that's one of the reasons why. Well, it's probably the main reason why I utilize play is not just because of how relatable it is to children or how it should be relatable, but because it's a form of misdirection, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So for those who either dislike exercise, who are trying to have a love affair of exercise and find it difficult, or for those who who are completely averse to exercise, absolutely no chance am I going to get on my training shoes and go to a gym. I can use play as a magician. Use the sleight of hand to kind of go, I will get you to experience something through movement, which is playful. And all you're going to be focusing on is the joy of movement. You're not going to be thinking about calories burnt, about, you know, intensity of exercise or the perceived, you know, rate of exertion, anything like that. You're just going to be thinking, oh, we're playing a game and I'm enjoying this, and hopefully I want to continue to do this. And I think that's my application of play, because I think it is very serious. I think even as a child, play was very serious to myself and many of my peers. It wasn't just about hilarity and fun, actually, because if you think about, well, when I think about play as a kid, and you think about many of the games that are universal, a lot of the games are actually trying to create, you know, you're actually trying to increase your levels of anxiety in many respects in the short term. You know, chasing games, right? You know, you want to be chased, or you want to be the person chasing. Hide and seek. Let me find the most secluded spot, hopefully dark, right? And where I'm hidden. So I think for many adults, we forget about our relationship with play as kids. And all we see as adults is, oh, you know, let's just skip around, popping balloons and rolling down the hill. And isn't that fun? Hey, play is just so much fun. Actually, no. Most play is very, very, very serious. Most of the time kids are playing, they don't have a smile on their face. They're not laughing. They are really serious. They're talking about how many lives you have. You know, you've got 3 lives. You can only, you know, like, you're being chased by monsters, and, you know, those are the things that you're preoccupied as kids, actually. And we forget about this. We forget about that's what kids want. They want that adventure. Yeah. And whether you're in the city or in the country, I was a city boy, but we had, I suppose, in many respects, we would try to mimic, I suppose, what you may have had in the country and the moors. So we did have our mini swamps, and we had the canals, right? You know, we had our adventures in our local parks, and we tried to find the unmanicured part of the parks where we could build dens. And so, yeah, I think as an adult, trying not to patronize myself as a child, and realizing how powerful that metaphor is for life now as an adult, and what I was missing out on for most of my adult life is thinking, put those childish ways to one side and think of them only nostalgically. So as we were both talking about our childhood, it's like, oh yes, we used to do, oh, that was so amazing, the things we used to do. And for me, the bigger question is, how many of those things can I do now, but in adult form? And it doesn't always mean trying to model what I did, you know, mimic what I did as a kid, but certainly model what I did as a kid, but enjoy it as an adult.
And I think, just sorry, Darryl, just to come in as you're saying this as well, but something that came out of conversation I was having the other week is, if you're talking with an adult and you're using play with them, then sometimes what that can do is trigger something in a memory that might need discussing. So it could be, for example, it could be something like, my parents didn't play with me very much when I was little, because you've used the word play in the nature of a consultation you're having with the patient. And that might then obviously enable you to open up other aspects of behavior that may be going on, and maybe why they're not doing the exercise that you're looking for them to do. So, and also, as you're alluding, you know, playing opens up to sort of playing a game of cards, playing a musical instrument, playing, you know, it's a lifestyle aspect as well. It's it's quite interesting to explore it as a word which it just helps more in a consultation, I think.
I think another really good comment here is that, I mean, you both know that I have a real interest in indigenous philosophies and, how things perhaps were before the industrialized kind of revolution. And also the continents, the nice thing about whenever you look at play is it doesn't matter where you are in history terms, or as far back as you go. Everything was about play in growing up. But obviously that play in the very much earlier days was much more high risk. But whereas when we make that transformation into the modernized, in inverted commas, world, or more westernized world, then that's where the big boundary walls start going up, because it's where we are now. So obviously the longer we go down this road, without getting play back in there in some kind of way. Because as Darryl's experiencing now with his books and the young people who are actually using them, is that they're waking back up again to something that has been there a very, very long time, and that is so important as part of growing up.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. We are where we are, but what can we do to address the issues? And as you say, I mean, like yourself, I have a sort of a passion for evolutionary biology and our kind of human ancestry. And so play is not only a part of our history and prehistory, it's a significant part of all animal species, right? And so we see all the time, we witness it, we see, pigeons playing with each other, we see dogs chasing each other. It's all over the animal kingdom. We see it in young kids when they're given the opportunities to just free roam and free play. Unfortunately, we as a species dictate at a certain age, we need to dial down the kind of play factor in our offspring. You're too old now, you need to become more serious, more sedate, slow down, stop exploring, stop being creative, conform. That's the problem. Because if you look at the rest of the animal kingdom, you will see a big cat playing with their offspring, and it's not even a case of the adults of the species playing with the younger offspring, but you can see that the play behavior is still exhibited, and it tends to be extinguished only when the animal's on its last legs, or they're very stressed or deprived of energy. But pretty much they maintain that playful spirit all the way through their lives. And we as humans decide, oh, actually, no, that's not the behavior of the human being, is not acceptable. So we can't wait for our kids to get out, to be able to stand and to start walking. But as soon as they become adept at that, we're like, hey, can you stop walking around? Can I actually put you in a harness now? Can I make sure I can supervise what you do, because I'm no longer happy with the fact that you're exploring the world around you? And I think that's the biggest issue in the last sort of generation or two is, I'm happy, for example, that I didn't play much with my parents, to be honest.
Right.
Because I think I shouldn't have been playing with the majority of my time in play shouldn't have been with my parents. The majority of time me playing should have been with my peers of mixed ages, doing the things that I probably shouldn't have been doing. Because if my parents were dictating all of my childhood play experiences, there were probably 90% of the things I did, I wouldn't have been able to do. and that's not even that, that's even just talking about things like climbing, the first time I probably went to climb a tree, my parents probably would have said, no, it's dangerous, you can't do it, the risks, you might fall, you might break an arm, no. So I think this is a problem of where we're at now. Many parents feel they need to be spending more time. Oh, that's really, that sounds quite harsh, but we feel we have to become more and more engaged with our children, and including play experiences.
Right.
So we feel as if we need to become more involved. So I want to be involved with their play dates. I want to be involved with all of their extracurricular activities, driving them there, watching them whilst they're doing it, taking them, bringing them back home safely. Isn't this a wonderful world we're in? They're doing so many things that I could only dream of as a kid.
Right.
But most of those experiences are supervised. Most of those experiences are not free play.
Yes.
Most of those experiences do not allow the child to develop themselves physically, emotionally, and psychologically, because we're always there supervising them. And like any creature that is always being watched, their behavior is different to what it would normally be. And that's what I feel is the most harmful aspects of 21st century parenting.
Yeah.
Is that the helicopter parenting, it's the over supervision.
You're sort of you're crossing into what I would tend to suggest is almost the damaging effects of pampering. We know an awful lot about, through the years of research that have been done, to do with neglecting the neglected child and the damaging effect that can have. But actually, I think there's a lot of damage can happen as a result of over pampering of children. And actually, there's an element of what you're saying there, I think, touches on pampering.
Well, you saw me rolling around there again, trying to stay on the seat really and not fall off. And also, I must say quickly before I forget, is this. I had an image of, when you said you were playing in the city and I was playing in the country, that could be a really, really good talk that is not only so humorous, it actually makes an incredible point, which you were making, just a few moments ago, of this element of children being able to play within their own contexts. And that might be dangerous. Well, I had a couple of huge moments, in my very early teens, through getting maybe a little bit overambitious on excitement and challenge. And, it's not worth, sort of going into those bits of stories, but part of it involved me coming home, coughing up blood out of my mouth and coming down my nose, and mum saying, "Oh, if you don't know what you've done." She's come home from work, of course, and I said I fell down the stairs, and got away with that for about 30 years. So I actually told it was playing. So, I think that's the first thing that maybe, I know we're both very busy, but that would be such a thing. You on one side of a podium talking about the city childhood thing, me on the other doing exactly the same, from a country perspective. And that in between, both are exactly right. And like Neil's saying right now, about having the wisdom part of this as adults now, to be able to blend that in a way that we're more accurate for other parents to understand the value of both of these types of things we're talking about.
Graham, I think that's a fantastic idea of that, talking about our childhoods, and superficially they would seem so different from each other, but actually there's significant overlap, because ultimately it is about your interaction with your environment, right? And there are going to be things that are kind of missing from both environments, which can't be substituted. So one example would be, adventure playgrounds in the city. Right? There was nothing in nature that that mimics an adventure playground. Where at the same time, there is nothing that exists in a lot of nature that you can create artificially in the same way, or that you can experience. But that would be a fantastic kind of a rally back and forth But certainly, I think just to finish this point, I think the drive for exploration, right? The creativity. Oh, what are we going to do today? Oh, we're bored, no idea. Oh, I know. One kid goes, oh, I know what we'll do. Blah 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 blah. Oh no, let's do this instead. Yeah, let's do that instead. Like imagine how many kids no longer have that discussion because what are we going to do? Oh, we don't have to decide what to do because we're just going to continue to speak to each other on our smart devices.
Yeah.
Or you know what I mean? Our worlds are already provided for us here. Everything's here. Artificial intelligence right here. Virtual reality right here.
I've just got an image there now, like the one that I just had a moment ago with you, city childhood, and me, country childhood, and then this third place on a stage or a setting, which is the modern youth kid who doesn't move out while we're living what actually games he's playing on his phone or his iPad or device, where he's running and jumping over a stream or, trying to catch a rabbit or whatever it is. We're actually talking about it in the real world. That would be pretty cool, I think.
It's fascinating how, again, technology is so incredible. What we can do with technology today, but we are old enough and young enough to be able to see both sides of the coin. We can see the evolution of technology and how crude it was when we were kids. So it was very easy. I mean, I loved technology as a kid. I went into cafes playing the first video games and Asteroid and Space Invaders, Pac-Man, and I'd spend hours playing them. I will confess, if I could afford to, right? But I tried to get very good at it so I could my 5 pence or 10 pence would last forever. but the point is, you still knew there was a very big separation between that artificial world and what was outside. The outdoors are still more fascinating. My time with my friends was always more fascinating than whatever I could play on a computer screen. Unfortunately, now that the lines are so blurred, for some children, artificial reality, virtual reality is more impressive than the real world, and it shouldn't be, right? But for some kids, I think they're like, oh my gosh, why would I want to go outside and play when I've got the whole world right here in front of me? I fortunately haven't felt that. Do you feel that given that kids, we know children in the first few years, right? That's where they develop. Their brain develops more in the first sort of like 12 months than it does at any other period of their life. And in the first 5 years, again, significantly development. So if our brains are being wired at a very young age via technology, even if our parents are saying, hey, there's all these other fun things we can do. If the majority of the time is spent streaming, watching streaming, interacting with photos and whatever else with devices. So kids are now being educated, they're being babysat by technology. And that's something which is relatively new. Right. Even as a kid, I'm sure my parents occasionally said, hey, watch TV just to keep you quiet, watch a cartoon to keep you quiet. But there was still a finite window of that working.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely.
Whereas now, now I feel you could almost go, I could do this forever. I could get my kid to be satisfied forever utilizing this piece of technology, because there's always something else to do. There's always another dopamine hit. There's always that level of interaction that can keep them being engaged with that tech. That's what I think it isn't just about parental influence. It isn't just about giving our kids alternatives. I think kids are just being wired that way.
I think you're right. I think one of the aspects that I've learnt in the last few years as well, in terms of brain development, because you were mentioning that, our brainwave development, it's really interesting to realize that theta is the brainwave of the subconscious. So you can see how those early years of behaviors, environment, how they were brought up, what they may have heard language-wise, can get into the brain's behaviors and your emotions, etc., later in life.
Yeah, and I suppose we can observe. We're aware of the impact of social media on our young, which has a more devastating impact on our young than it does of adults, and the impact of addiction, the impact of what they perceive to be social norms that come about by what isn't real, and as well as the kind of subconscious aspects of this, we know there is this neuroplasticity, right? We know that our brains basically become hardwired based on our experiences. Yeah. So if your experiences are constantly instant dopamine hits, we know risk and reward is important.
Yeah.
And that's why play is important, because just like Graham's experience of coming back, coughing at blood and the like, he had to evaluate what I would like to do, which involves a risk. What's the reward? Okay, if I do this, then blah 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 blah. These are all the reasons why this is something I have to do. But hey, these are the risks. You know what? I'm still going to go for it. You have to think about it. You've got to process that. You've got to evaluate it, and hopefully come through the other side. Just having to explain to mum 30 years later what happened. But for many of our kids, they're constantly being primed on instant gratification, on swipe and you will have it now.
Yeah, but Darryl, you've got to also think, I think you've got to ask the reasons as well. Why are they being drawn to the social media element? Is it because they're getting something that they're not getting in the real world? Are they getting something from somebody in a virtual world, in a social media world, which is playing to the needs that they may have?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And that's what we have to that's what we have to work with, because it means, therefore, that perhaps the engagement level that they're getting in the real world, in their home environment, isn't good enough. And why isn't it good enough, therefore? And therefore, what do we have to do to make sure that they're not constantly being drawn to want to use social media? And then suddenly they go into the social media, another element of social media, and they realize, oh, shoot, that this is not very nice. They're not being very nice to me now. Do I want to use it? Actually, and then they've got this dilemma, potentially. I'm only speculating here, but they've got this dilemma of, which world do I prefer? Do I prefer this world of social media where there are some needs being addressed, or do I prefer this world of where I am here right now and what I'm doing?
I just don't think there are enough people in the other world, unfortunately, Neil.
Right.
I think it's there has to be some coexistence, because even again, we can think of this example. We're well aware of this example whereby, say nutrition for kids. I know many parents who will say, very proud of the fact, they will say, my kids don't even like chocolate. They don't even like sweets. They don't drink fizzy drinks. They have this perfect diet that I eat myself. My kids just love it. Right? They even go to their friends' parties and they're like, oh, no, I won't drink a fizzy drink. No. But there comes a time when those kids start to pay more attention to their peers rather than their parents. And so the new world of, oh my goodness, this is what a fizzy drink. Why are you drinking that fizzy drink? Because I like it. Well, we've been told we shouldn't drink it. Or maybe you should. Try it for yourself. oh my goodness, my parents lied to me, just like they did about Santa Claus, right? Then they go off on their own and then start to make their own choices. And I think, unfortunately, because of the psychological science behind these technological endeavors, which mean we are, and as a former software developer myself, right, you can see what drives a developer to think of even more ingenious ways of getting someone to interact with this platform. And that's all that these social media companies are trying to do. How can we get more people to spend more time interacting with this environment and to stay here? So we need to give people what they want. So let's present the best view of the world that everyone else is showing, right? Let's show this amazing world that everyone else is living, that we can aspire to tick. Let's get likes every time we post something that we feel is favorable. Let's get sympathy when we're going through problems, and we can, let's get this constant feedback. And I think it's almost too, I don't say it's an impossible situation to navigate, but I think we just need a better way of learning how to coexist. Because as I said earlier, I think we do have a reference point which is based on our past. So we can go, we're aware of what the real world is, and we can see, where this is fake. For our kids, they're brought up, they're literally coming out of the womb on Instagram lives now, right? They it's like, woo, yeah, I'm in the, their whole lives are being documented with that. I think too much has happened in a very short space of time. And even myself, I struggle with the lure of social media. But at least I know in the back of my mind, I'm like, Darryl, just go outside and put your phone away, interact with the person in front of you rather than wanting to pick up your phone, have a real conversation, socialize properly. But some kids, if you say to them, hey, why don't you go to your friend's house and catch up? It's like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Why would I expend that energy going to somebody's house when I can just communicate with them right here, right now, in my room, by myself, on a device? I think we just don't understand the different view of the world that our kids have. I think that's an issue for us as adults. We just have no idea what they're going through.
I can give you two really good examples of this. Almost 20 years ago now, Manchester's youth gang scene, right? They think they can drive faster than anybody because they played Colin McRae, whatever it was back in them days, 1 or 2 or whatever. Yeah. I think both of you know I had pretty much a 30-year background in rallying, sort of nationally and internationally. So I know the reality of throwing a car around and what happens, and especially if you're at really high speeds. Now, the gang kids think, that they can ride the biggest, powerfulest motorbike and do wheelies 200 meters down the road because they can do it on a computer. So one of the things I wanted to address with them in an appropriate way was the reality, I call it the real reality, which is what Darryl's touching on right now. Part of that is about, and he touched on it again a little while ago, about me figuring out whether I would get away with this thing that I was going to have a go at, because I knew it was really quite risky. But I also knew what my skills and sort of balance and strength or whatever was. And I know they were fairly close. And obviously, I didn't quite come out on the right side of that one. But I am still here to tell the story. I know there's an issue there that we can't have kids doing stuff really, really dangerous. But one of the things I did with the youth gang kids was to get them on a go-kart track fairly early. The first one was to immerse them in nature, and the second one really was to get them on a go-kart track. And they knew I had a long history in rallying. It was part of how I got credit, I guess, from them in a sneaky kind of way, apart from an army background of 9 years. So those little snippets of information, without much explanation around them, leads them to ask questions. And you can imagine, just announcing the fact you've got a 9-year military history, before I could go any further was, have you killed anybody? But, the kids kind of know that you have been there and you have kind of done that. And so you begin to get a credibility. And, I would make the statement, this is usually after them telling me how fast they are on Colin McRae. And I say, well, we are in a few weeks, hopefully, if everything goes according to plan A-ish, we'll get you on a go-kart track. But then by the time they go in there, they're like, I can't be an idiot on here. Because I'll know they're being a total idiot and they really haven't got a clue. And yet you're trying to tell, and I used to do this in the brief before they went on, you guys are telling me you can drive and you know what that means. So a 4-wheel neutral slide or, whether you're going to oversteer and do this, we'll see whether you can do all of those things. And you can see them drinking, and the go-kart tracks were not very happy about a bunch of gang kids turning up, and they were the best behaved bunch of kids on go-karts first time ever, right? So it's about these processes again. But when the kids think something, which is what Darryl's point is, think something in the virtual world gives them the skills in the real world, it doesn't. And the other one, the second part to it is, it's a very funny, what was it now? A war game that was very old. It was out back in them days on the computer. Everybody, it's still around now, version whatever, 10 or whatever.
Call of Duty?
Call of Duty. Yes, that's what it was, yeah. I see you played it.
Yeah.
So I've got a bunch of gang kids who are the greatest snipers and the greatest this, that, and the others, in this virtual world of Call of Duty, And I'm kind of saying, well, do you think the real world is as easy as that? Yeah, you can get all the skills and you can shoot, and everything else. And then I said, well, okay, let's put it in the curriculum. Let's do a session, maybe a couple of hours, and we'll set up a few places where we can play. You can show me how skilled you are. And one of them was a courtyard, which you can enter down some steps into a little. You can't see anywhere, but you've got to turn right. And then immediately you can begin to see in this courtyard. And diagonally opposite on the far side, I don't know, maybe 100 meters or so away, is a similar thing. And it's just surrounded by, flats and, I don't know how many dwellings there are in that, but probably in the 100 or more. And they just walk down the stairs and go around the corner, and sort of wait while somebody starts shooting at them, and it's like, no, I don't think so. If that was real, I said, lads, if that was real and you have no idea what's in that courtyard, would you really go down there and just go around the corner to look? And then they look at you as if to think, would I? And then they're trying to match the real world with that world that they're immersed in. And they begin to realize that maybe I wouldn't do that. So then you get, well, how are you going to do that then tactically? And that's the difficulty. If nothing is followed up around how that can be linked to the real world, then unfortunately, you lose very young people, especially in those kind of settings. They lose their lives.
Yeah, and the two things that out of what you've just said, Graham. Yeah, and the two things that out of what you've just said, Graham and Darryl, I think curiosity and emotions. The emotions that you are feeling playing a computer game are nothing like the real world. When you are in the real world and you are playing either in a car and you're actually driving the car, or you've got the gun in your hands, suddenly there is a more primitive instinct that comes into play. You are still being curious, but you suddenly have different feelings, and those feelings will change and influence your behaviors. So you have more mixed emotions going on, which you then have to work through when you're sitting there at the wheel of a car, or you're there with a gun. So that's what comes out of it for me is your sense of feelings and emotions that you just can't get it from a virtual world. Can you ever?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very hard because obviously the emotional set that you get, for example, in sport, you don't win anything usually right near the very beginning, but you feel a sense of loss, which is an emotional, but you also begin to develop a belief that if I try this harder or practice more or whatever, then I would probably get better at that. Now, that does happen in a virtual world, and they do become better at playing a game. But I think the real crux of the matter is, what does that do in relation to them in the real world, where they have to relate what the lessons are from a virtual world into the real one?
Yes.
And obviously, that was a large part of the type of work that I was doing with those groups at that time. And nowadays, we're 20 years down the road, it's going to be 20 years more difficult. And if we let it go much longer, I don't know whether some of this will ever be reversible. I don't know if you know, for example, I did go on a really top simulator once at the British Grand Prix. I was feeling a little bit sick. But when you look at the research around that, do you know that most pilots, for example, civil airlines or military for that matter, they have to do at least once a year a crisis thing in a virtual simulator, and the vast majority of them get sick. And the reason that is what they know for real. It's working the other way. This is what's happening.
Right.
So because they fly a military jet or they fly a civil airline, and it behaves in a way that they know when they do something what happens. In the virtual world, as close as that is getting, it isn't quite the same. And so what happens in the brain is a misinformation, which alters these brainwaves that Neil's talking about a moment ago. And then when they start changing, there's a conflict and they start feeling ill, and it's almost like travel sickness. You want to throw up and you're dizzy.
Okay. That's interesting.
That's really fascinating. But I imagine if they only ever use the simulator, right, they wouldn't get sick.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's the point in relation to the virtual reality world. Is that for many of our kids, that is the real world, right? They don't,
Yeah. If we were an adult, okay, and we learned to fly in a virtual world really well, and we were an adult, we would get into let's say it's the glider, because it seems a bit more soft and civil. So we learned to fly the glider on the ground, on the computer, but then we're going to actually go up. And, once you get towed up there and he pulls a little lever and you're alone, that's like where you have to face all of these things, that this is now real. Most people probably wouldn't do that because they think, you know what? But that's because they're put in that very challenging position of, I'm going to make this real for you right now, like I did in the go-karts. This is going to be very real right now. So you're going to step into a real glider. It's going to take you up to 800 feet or maybe 1,000 feet. And then it's just going to let you go. It's up to you. I don't know whether I might have had a go at that as a 20-year-old, maybe 18. I'm not so sure I would right now. I think I would at least have one lesson and see how that went. And then, if that went really good, I'd be quite happy probably to go the second time. But that's me. What we're talking about right now are people and young people that have this world evolving that is not symbiotic with the real world.
That's superbly put.